All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this great webinar on romance scams by Paul Greenwood. My name is Mark Bancroft with San Diego County Credit Union. I'll be your co-host for this webinar. I'd like to introduce Paul Greenwood, extraordinary guy. He has over 25 years of experience, having been involved in the prosecution of over 600 felony cases of elder and dependent adult abuse. Greenwood is a renowned award-winning prosecutor. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Paul Greenwood.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mark, and welcome everybody as I highlight my screen here. Thank you for joining us for this Groundhog Day webinar in anticipation of Valentine's Day. You know, I'm very grateful to San Diego County Credit Union for being willing to put on this webinar every year. We've done it for many years now, and in order of transparency, I've been a member of the San Diego County Credit Union for years. I've been a resident of San Diego County itself for over 30 years, even though I don't sound like I have. And I am so thankful that we have a financial institution, San Diego County Credit Union, who places at its priority protection for its members' finances. And this is one example of that. So I call myself still a newly retired prosecutor, even though it has been, gosh, almost 4 years since I left the San Diego DA's office. But my professional life has basically been involved in trying to crack open many of these crimes that you're seeing on the screen now. The predators are out there. And unfortunately, they're alive and well, and they woke up this morning, and the first question on their mind was, how can I rip somebody off today? And unfortunately, we are their targets. Every single one of us is a target for a predator out there. I was in the San Diego DA's office for 25 years. It was the best professional assignment I've ever had in my legal career of over 40 years. Why on earth would I quit? Well, partly it was because I had just turned 66 in March of 2018. So in just over a month's time, I'm going to be celebrating my 70th birthday. It's hard to get my head around that, but that's the reality of it. And I found out back in 2018 that when you're 66 and in full-time employment, something wonderful can happen to you. It's called a gift every third Wednesday of the month, called Social Security. So when I added in my Social Security to my county pension, it seemed to make sense. But also because of this number. No, this is not my county pension. This was a headline that I was seeing in 2018. And this basically was the headline. And what was happening was I was getting calls from all over the country, from Adult Protective Services, from law enforcement, from prosecutors saying, Mr. Greenwood, we've heard about the work that you're doing in San Diego. Any chance you can come out to our community and help revive or energize or start a prosecution investigation program to protect the elderly? And I realized if I was going to do that, then my day job would suffer. So for the last almost 4 years, I've been involved now in a wider community, sharing the lessons that I've learned in the courtroom with whoever would like to hear. And today is an example of that. You know, elder financial abuse is a really, really critical problem in this country. And this is another example of the losses that we see. This is a report back in 2015, 36.5 billion. Can you imagine what it is today? So I originally came from the UK, and how on earth did I end up in San Diego? Thankfully, I was very fortunate to find my true love in the right place. For me, it was while I was traveling around the United States. I came to San Diego for 2 whole days in August of 1973, and I walked into a Baptist church in University City, and the only empty seat was sitting next to this gorgeous young lady who became my wife in August of 78, and we've been married now for almost 44 years. Sue is from San Diego, so after she gave me 13 years in England, she said, I miss the blue skies, and who can blame her? So we came here. So we left in 1991. I arrived here with a wife, 2 children, aged 10 and 4, jobless, unqualified. What did I have to do? Sit for the dreaded California bar exam in a big convention center room in San Diego. Thankfully, I was able to convince the bar examiners that I knew more than I really did, and they gave me a pass in December of 1991. So I was sworn in as an attorney. Joined a civil law firm for 2 years, but then I got my big break. In 1993, I joined the San Diego DA's office. And of those 25 years, I spent the last 22, from 1996 to 2018, prosecuting crimes primarily committed against older adults, as well as adults with disabilities. And of all the cases that I prosecuted, 65% of them involved some kind of fraud, some kind of exploitation. And one thing I want us all to reflect on is not just that older adults are victims. Anybody of any age can become a victim of a fraud or a scam. But what we're seeing typically, and later on I'll show you a slide which shows the demographics of which age groups get targeted and who lose more money. Right now, the classic demographic for losing to a romance scam is age 60 to 70. Within that age bracket is the primary targeted group. But unfortunately, older adults are particularly susceptible to these crimes, particularly to the romance scam, because there's a lot more people of these age groups who are looking for love because maybe they've gone through a divorce, maybe they've lost a loved one, and they need to regroup their lives, and they're looking for a companionship. Possibly not love in that sense, but they're certainly looking for a companion, if not more. And they do have the money. You know, our age groups seem to have savings. So why do older adults particularly become victims? It's partly generational. I think of my own late parents, of their World War II generation. They were taught to be trusting over the phone, in person, handshakes. It's partly cultural, particularly where you have a suspect who pretends to be of the same kind of social, cultural affinity. It's partly circumstances, and in the last 2 years, those circumstances have been the pandemic, where we are all being more socially isolated, and we're relying more heavily upon this communication through internet, through iPhones, through iPads. So the information that I want to share today is not just for victims or potential victims. It should also be for family members, for sons and daughters of a parent who may be trying to delve into the online dating scene. It's also for professionals, such as people who work in credit unions and in banks. It's also for people who work in convenience stores. Why do I say that? I'll tell you in a minute. But family members need to be on the lookout. During the course of my career as a prosecutor, I can't tell you the number of times that I received a phone call from an upset, almost angry adult son or daughter who has just discovered that their parent is a victim of the romance scam or of the grandma scam or of the sweepstakes scam. But a lot of them were victims of the romance scam, and they just discovered that their parent has lost 50,000, 100,000 or more to this scam. And they're angry, they're upset. They want me to do something about it. They want me to fix it. They want me to go after the suspect. And one of the questions I've always been asking is, but where were you when all this was going on? So I really think that we have a duty as sons and daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, nephews, nieces, to be on the lookout, to actually engage our older family members in these kinds of conversations. And if your older relatives tells you, oh, I've met this fantastic person online, then you need to be zeroing in on that. Who are they? Can I meet them? Oh, let's do a Zoom call with them. How exciting. I'd love to talk to them. And of course, we know that if it's a scam, the suspect will never, ever get online with a virtual Zoom, Skype, FaceTime call. We need to recognize the red flags. You know, I could write a chapter or more on how the romance scam works because I've heard the story so many times. Call me cynical, call me skeptical, but actually I think more realistically, it is, I'm living in the, unfortunately, in this real world, it's often a dark world, a world of fraud and misrepresentation. For credit unions and banks, what do they need to look out for? The person who walks in and asks to withdraw $10,000 in cash. Why? Why would they suddenly need $10,000 in cash? Red flags. So unusual withdrawals. And where do they take the cash? They take it to the convenience store. What do they buy with the cash? They often buy gift cards. That's what the predators want us to purchase these days, gift cards, because they're not so easy to trace. But in addition, now they're asking us to use these. Have you ever seen one of these? This is a Bitcoin ATM. You'll see them. You may not have been looking for it, but it's probably in your supermarket right now. It's in your grocery store. It's in your 7-Eleven liquor store. And lots of victims are being asked to take their iPhones, their smartphones, and put it up against the ATM for the Bitcoin with a barcode, and this will immediately register, and then you will be buying Bitcoin, and it will immediately go to the suspect's account. So we've got to educate ourselves about how victims are being exploited. And I do encourage you, as we go through this webinar, and I'm pleased to see that we have 84 attendees right now. Over 180 were registered, so maybe more will join us. But think of a question, put it in the chat box where it says questions, and Mark will monitor those, and we'll make time at the end to answer as many of those as we can. And then I'm going to also give you my contact information with my email address. So if you have a burning question that you'd like me to answer, I'll be more than happy to answer it offline through an email, okay? So how prevalent do you think these scams are? Well, for example, back in 2019, look at where romance scams featured in the Senate Aging Committee's fraud hotline, featured as number 4 on the list, above grandparent, IRS, identity theft, and others. So it's there. And if you look at this report from the US Senate Special Committee on Aging, which was, this is the latest report that came out a year or so ago, it talks about the rise in the number of romance scams that have been done during this pandemic. And we know the reason why, again, because of the fact that we are now more dependent on connection with other people through virtual communications. They say that last year was one of the loneliest years. And look at the bottom. This comes from the Federal Trade Commission and the Senate Committee on Aging. Telling people to avoid online dating in times of isolation is not going to work. However, all of us can do our best to educate ourselves. And that is, again, the purpose of this webinar, all right? So I won't be able to convince you not to go on the websites, but maybe some of you will be scared to do that. But at least we've got to be cautious. And if I were to give you one piece of advice, never, ever stop asking questions. Never. So according to this AARP article, romance scams was the top costliest scam, I think, in 2019 and 2020. Now, again, how accurate are these numbers? They're not accurate. You see, $83.7 million is just for the reported romance scams. But what percentage of romance scam victims actually report themselves? I would say less than a quarter. So you could probably triple this number or quadruple it, because too many victims of the romance scam are too embarrassed to say anything, certainly to their own families. Now, I mentioned earlier about the demographic. This graph shows you in red is the first 3 quarters of last year. In blue is the whole of 2020. So look at the age group 60 to 69. Do you see how already in the first 3 quarters of 2021, it was almost the same as the whole of the previous year? So clearly the number of losses of romance scam is growing, and this is your classic demographic for being targeted. So within a month or so, I'll be out of this demographic into the 70s to 79s, but even so, that is still a large number. So we call it the romance scam, or we call it the sweetheart scam. And I just want to go through the different scenarios that we have. I like this slide from the AARP because that's what we need to do. We need to guard our wallets as tightly as we guard our hearts. And sometimes the reason people become victims is they allow their hearts and their emotions to override their logic and their ordinary decision making. We have victims of this scam who are professionals. We have victims who are CEOs of companies, who are lawyers, CPAs, retired judges, architects, accountants, pastors, whoever, you name them. And nobody should be blaming themselves for this. There's too much victim blaming, but we should just be focusing more on the predators and the methods they use, and become more aggressive in how we identify them. So for me, there are 2 major types of this sweetheart scam, okay? Firstly, there is the face-to-face con artist. Believe it or not, there are many predators out there who will look for the classic victim in waiting. And sometimes it's very easy to identify the perfect victim. So who are these people? I call them professional predators. They're out there. Here's one such example. She was a real estate agent in California, Samantha Pham, and she's been convicted, sentenced for swindling. Look at this, a heartsick old man. And the victim was 67, so he fits that demographic again. She spent $50,000 of his money paying off her gambling debts. She met him on Match.com and then met him in person. So They often meet through legitimate business transactions or through what I call chance encounters, but it's not really chance. These people plan how they're going to meet their victims. And where do they meet their victims? Now, in all the cases that I've investigated, looked at, reviewed, prosecuted, this is where they meet them. Parking lots. Now, which parking lot would it be? Walmart, Home Depot, Target. They're sitting in parking lots right now looking for the lonely individual driving up, and they will absolutely target them. Places of faith, where you go to worship, they're there looking for the classic mark. They'll come knocking on your door. In one of my cases, the perpetrator was saying, "Oh, I've lost my cat. Have you seen a cat, a stray cat?" And then when she comes across an elderly man who clearly is all alone, she will start befriending him. I've seen predators in casinos looking around, we're looking for the perfect victim who's on their own. Grocery stores. The hook. What is the hook? Charm. Friendliness. They know exactly, excuse me, how to find and then how to target the victim's vulnerability. And so often they play upon the fact that the victim has lost a loved one, they're a widow or a widower, and they are looking for companionship. And in every case that I've dealt with a face-to-face contact, the victim appreciates the attention. And the perpetrator will often spend hours, even days, even weeks cultivating this friendship, because at the end of it, they know that they're going to get their hands onto the money. But sometimes, even if money is not their motive, using a dating online service does have its inbuilt dangers. Look at this. For example, you may be a person of faith, and you may think, well, I'll go and use a faith-based dating website because, you know, that way I feel more comfortable in who I'm going to meet. Look at this.
This defendant is a very dangerous serial date rapist and potentially a sociopath.
Strong words about a former naval officer convicted today of raping women he met on internet dating sites. Sean Banks used Christian Mingle and Match.com to target women of faith. Good evening. I'm Kimberly Hunt.
And I'm Steve Atkinson. Tenders reporter Jennifer Jensen is live at the El Cajon courthouse. And Jen, the prosecutor says this case has a message for all women.
Well, using Banks as an example, the prosecutor talked about how Banks would groom women. He would get to know them, get them to trust him over days, weeks, even months, but he was hiding his true intentions.
This defendant is a very dangerous serial date rapist and potentially a sociopath.
Harsh words from prosecutor David Williams III as he reacted to the conviction of 38-year-old Sean Banks.
We, the jury in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Sean Patrick Banks, guilty of the crime of rape of an intoxicated woman.
The former Navy lieutenant showed little emotion inside the El Cajon courtroom as jurors found him guilty. Guilty on 5 counts of forcible rape, rape of an unconscious person, and burglary stemming from 2 separate incidents. He was found not guilty of trying to dissuade a witness.
Sean Banks would spend weeks, if not months, grooming these victims, making them believe that he was an honest, trustworthy, and Christian man.
One victim testified that the two met on Christian Mingle, where they talked about God, faith, and the Bible. Back in 2012, they decided to meet at her La Mesa apartment to watch a movie, but she testified that Banks became forceful.
So that is a good warning to so many people, that just because you use a, quote, Christian website doesn't give you any guarantees. Okay, the second type, which is what probably we want to focus on today, is online websites, where you will cultivate and start cultivating a friendship, looking for love with a potential suitor that you meet online. Sometimes it's referred to as catfishing, when the perpetrator uses somebody else's identity. It all came from an online, a TV program called Catfish. So they create fake personal profiles or use somebody else's identity to pretend to be somebody other than themselves. So who are these people?
Now to a story you saw first on 2. A Texas woman scammed out of thousands of dollars. 2 people now arrested, and the ploy investigators say they used involved convincing people on social media that they are talking to pop superstar Bruno Mars. That is not what I like. Andy Sirota covering this wild story tonight. Andy?
Dominique, investigators calling the masterminds of schemes like this predators because they seek out and take advantage of mature women who are on social media just simply looking for companionship. This scheme, we are told, was likely hatched overseas in a foreign country on the other side of the world.
A 65-year-old North Texas woman is out $100,000 after she fell in love with someone who was pretending to be Bruno Mars. Cybercrimes prosecutors say he befriended her on Instagram, convinced her that he was the famous entertainer and that he needed help with his touring expenses. According to court papers, a man identifying himself as Bruno Man promised he was quitting his current tour to be with her.
They will spend months talking to people online. Sometimes they'll even borrow a little bit of money and return it to build up trust. And they're not stupid people, these scammers. They are very much sophisticated con artists.
Authorities say they had help. Basil Amadi and Chinwendu Azuanwu, 2 men in Houston who opened up the 2 different bank accounts where she was instructed to send the money to. One check for $10 grand, followed by another for $90,000.
And what these people do is they will recruit people to open up bank accounts. So what you have is you have the people at the bottom opening the bank accounts, people in the middle that are doing the recruiting and communicating with the hackers, and the hackers.
One of those men went before a judge to hear the allegations against him.
Charged with the 3rd-degree felony of money laundering.
Prosecutors hope the 2 men cooperate so they can find out more about who recruited them.
Because that's who we're interested in.
Now, I know some of you watching this go, well, that'll never happen to me. I mean, anyone knows that Bruno Mars is not short of money, so he's not going to be asking. But it's not just that, because if we start judging other victims and saying, well, I wouldn't be as stupid as that person, that actually, pride comes before a fall. I just wanted to show you that as one extreme example. But here is somebody posing as a celebrity, but using Instagram. You know, all these different social media outlets are being flooded by crooks. So again, it sometimes gives us a false sense of security. Twitter, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, which I call Fakebook sometimes. You know, these are all venues and conduits for the crooks. Oh, yeah, sorry. So sometimes the crooks are even operating not from overseas, but from within United States prisons. You know, it is very easy, unfortunately, to smuggle a cell phone into prison. And how do some of these crooks spend their time? On a cell phone, portraying themselves as being somebody else. Or they could be overseas with other co-conspirators working domestically within the United States of America. So for example, in Virginia, a man originally from Ghana in Virginia swindled Chesapeake a victim out of over $300,000. And, you know, again, it's the classic example of he needed money to buy for his business. And here's another one in Kansas City, Missouri, another Ghana native residing in Virginia, indicted on the sweepstakes scam. Here's a couple of co-conspirators from Maryland, who are working with other co-conspirators outside of the country to receive and launder payments from victims. Here's a fella from living in Scotland, targeted 500 victims on Snapchat with the romance scam. Here's one from Oklahoma, again, convicted of money laundering, multiple victims, including older Americans, millions of dollars. So it goes on. So let's break this down and see what kind of consistent red flags we should be looking for.
Looking for love in all the right places, like popular dating sites, mobile apps, and social networking sites? Ron seems like a perfect match for you. He's thoughtful and says he can't live without you. He says he's from the US but works out of the country. He says he wants to visit but says he can't afford it. He asks you to send him money. Last month it was medical bills for a sick aunt. This month he needs money to fix his car. Next month, who knows? Ron wants your money. Don't send it. The person pretending to be Ron is a scammer. He'll tell you anything to get you to wire cash right away. He'll never run out of excuses. If an online love interest asks you for money, walk away, no matter how compelling the story. Report scams at ftc.gov/imposters.
Okay, we need that to sink in. If anybody online asks you for money, even if it's $5, run away, delete them. Okay, we say that, but unfortunately, right now there are victims who are not listening to that and they're giving money. So right now there are scammers trolling, literally trolling the internet looking for victims, stealing identities, creating a favorable, attractive profile.
So I think this is interesting. More than 1/3 of all couples now meet online, many of them on dating websites. Yeah.
Unfortunately, those dating sites are also prime ground for scammers looking to prey on broken-hearted folks out there. Well, consumer reporter John Matarese is on your side with a warning everyone using these sites needs to hear.
If you're single and looking for a partner or recently divorced, an online dating site can be the answer to your prayers. But these cyber dating sites come with a real risk. One Warren County woman recently shared her story to warn others.
She's a 9-to-5 office worker. He was a handsome U.S. serviceman, and it looked as though it could blossom into the romance of her life.
He told me he was from New York and that he was stationed in Kabul right now. And he had a almost 16-year-old son and was looking for the love of his life because his wife had passed away several years ago.
Kathy, who asked that we not use her last name, found James, a strapping 50-something sergeant on a dating site.
I received an email that said, "Hey, you look interesting. I want to meet you."
Soon, she says, their conversations over books and wine turned into declarations of love. His messages saying, "I pledge my heart and all my love."
I was the love of his life, and he knew that God had sent me into his life for a reason.
But just as he was about to visit her during a leave, a snag developed, and he needed some money.
He sent me a list that totaled $300, and I said, "No, I'm not sending you that. I can't afford that." And he said, "Well, how much can you afford?"
Kathy got suspicious.
I asked him repeatedly to verify his name, his rank, his serial number. And he said because of the job that he's doing in Kabul, he couldn't release that information.
At that point, she started searching online and found her James showing up all over dating sites as a...
Okay, so anybody that you meet online that you've never met in person or even on Skype, if they start calling you honey, run away, okay? If they start using the religion, God has brought us together, huge red flag. And then, of course, if they're asking you for money, run away. Here's another victim story. Again, they went onto a Christian website, said he was a missionary, started talking, needed money. And it was, thankfully, it was just $3,500, but even so, this person's heart is broken. And here's another victim story.
I look at it now and I think, how could I be so naive, This woman is still healing after losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in a scam and has asked us not to use her name. The 79-year-old ballroom dance executive says it happened after she decided to use an online dating service.
He was calling all the time. Almost every day he would call to see how I was. He also realized how musical I was or am and that I enjoyed dancing. So he would send a lot of music videos.
They decided to meet, but the man who said he was a general contractor abruptly needed to go to Malaysia for work. At one point, he said he needed money for a construction license.
The answers were always legitimate in my mind. And so I sent him the first $9,000.
Over several weeks, she sent more money. In all, more than $400,000.
And, you know, one thing that strikes me about this lady, I mean, she's articulate. She is clearly not in any kind of cognitive impairment, but it was her heart. And you could just tell what a lovely, lovely lady she is. And she allowed her heart to dictate all her decision-making. And yet more stories.
One of the most costly scams in America is now fueled by a pandemic that's making it even more effective. We're talking about romance scams. The Federal Trade Commission says even before COVID hit, a 40% spike last year led to $200 million in losses. And in tonight's special report, a warning: lonely hearts may be even more vulnerable now that scammers have another edge.
This is him down here.
Judy Vaughn just isn't ready to delete these photos from her cell phone. She's saved every message.
James, I always love you.
Since James Hackett met her online 3 years ago.
We would talk every day, half the night. He was always there to talk to me.
Kind words, even love songs that Vaughn admits filled a hole left by the death of her husband of 38 years. The two exchanged intimate details about their lives as this Anderson grandmother on disability learned Hackett was divorced and serving overseas. Vaughn says about a year into their online relationship, he told her he wanted to start a life with her, if only she could pay for his leave. $4,500.
My daughter-in-law looked him up on the computer, and it come up that he was a scammer. That was right at the beginning, and I didn't believe her.
What do you think of that now in hindsight?
I was crazy, and, you know.
Crazy in love.
Mm-hmm.
Over the next 2 years, Vaughn continued to honor his request for money, even as the total climbed to $10,000.
I know not send this money. You're going to send it anyway.
But his lies were catching up, and Vaughn sought the help of socialcatfish.com to figure out who he really was. The company tracked the photos of the man who called himself James Hackett to this real dog trainer in Russia, whose identity was stolen.
We've seen an increase across the board of images being stolen from people and people being contacted by scammers.
David McClellan, the president of Social Catfish, warns romance scams are on the rise during the pandemic as more are forced online and scammers have a better excuse not to meet in person. He says many of the con artists live across the world in Nigeria. One scammer from Lagos agreed to talk to us.
I'm not just scamming for just the money. Scamming for survival. A friend of mine introduced me to some kind of legal way of getting money from white people. So I asked him to teach me. I mean, I had no choice.
The man, who calls himself Kelly, says they target people online who are widowed or divorced.
You open dating site, you look for a picture of a doctor from Instagram.
The scammer told us they use a playbook of sorts. Social Catfish obtained this one that teaches others how to lure in their prey. And behind all these come-ons, they've gone high-tech, some changing their IP address to make it look like they're in the U.S.
Or they're buying Facebook accounts that were created 8 years ago, and they're creating these profiles so that, you know, when Facebook has their algorithms and all these different things, they have their guard down.
Vaughn takes responsibility too, but as the saying goes, the heart has reasons that reason doesn't know, and she's just not ready to say goodbye.
The part of me that probably still cared for him because he was so nice to me.
So how about that? Here's a victim. She knows she's a victim, but there's part of her that won't let go. And it just shows how deeply impacted, almost brainwashed, I suppose you could say, so many of these victims are. So there are lots of consistent red flags. And so if you are on a website and you're on this webinar now, there are certain things that should trigger some concerns if you see these on here. So if they use either a military background or an impressive professional career that actually attracted you in the first place, where they might start off on the website, but then try to maneuver the victim to a private or personal texting channel away from the website. And this is huge. They will never, ever agree to a FaceTime or a Zoom or a Skype call. Because if they do, their real identity is blown. Because they've already sent you, for example, a driver's license photograph. So you think you know what this person looks like. So if the suspect really got on FaceTime to go, wait a minute, that's not you. So that's why they'll always come up with a reason why they can't ever do a face-to-face on-camera chat. And then they will make plans to meet you. And you're going to get really excited about these plans and make dates, confirm them in the calendar. And then guess what happens? Suddenly, the planned rendezvous is canceled because of an emergency, maybe a medical problem, or, hey, I've just been called overseas. My company wants me to go to this place. I'm going to be out of action for a little while. And now they want you to send money immediately. Maybe some accident has befallen them. Maybe they need money to assist with their business venture, which is going to multiply, and then you're going to get back lots more money. So it's kind of like an investment opportunity for you.
Friends, are you looking for love? Valentine's Day is right around the corner, and daters beware, because that online flame can break your heart and burn a hole in your wallet. And that's just because of a successful date, a good date, or something that made you happy. Romance scams seem to be on the increase. There were more than 21,000 reports last year. That's according to the Federal Trade Commission. The median individual loss was about $2,600. That's a lot of money. A woman who spoke to NBC News says she met a man claiming to be a doctor who asked for a $100 Amazon gift card. Last year, our sister station in Minnesota followed a group of women to Texas as their scammer faced a judge. The man was posing as a military war hero online. And then he left a trail of victims all across the United States, conning them out of thousands of dollars.
So you get the gist of this. A trail of victims on that piece there, all seeking justice. 5, 6 ladies, all conned out of the same by the same guy. And this is something which we need to be very cognizant of, that some victims actually then become mules, money mules, and potentially face the prospect of being convicted as a criminal themselves. And you've heard of this description of money mules. So if someone sends you money and asks you to send it to someone else, don't do it, because you could then become a money mule, and you may well then become the focus of investigation by law enforcement. And I think we need to warn more and more people that if you are dabbling in this kind of activity, the chances are that you could become a defendant. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago, possibly that was not going to be a reality, but it's happening more and more these days. Now, I just want you to meet this lady. She's 81. She's from Kirkwood, Missouri. Her name is Glenda Syme, and I want you to listen to her story and how she refers to my love.
My name is Glenda, and I'm 81 years old. In 2014, I met the love of my life. online, and he told me that he was a U.S. citizen and was working in Nigeria. He asked me for money to help with his business and help leave Nigeria. Then my love had people send me electronics like cell phones so I could pawn them and send him the money. When I couldn't get the money that he wanted, he asked me to open personal and business bank accounts. Since 2015, bank employees, local police officers, and federal agents told me that my love was a scam and that I needed to stop or I could go to jail. I didn't listen to anyone else but my love, the love I've never seen nor spoken to. Now I don't have a choice of whom I'll listen to. On November the 2nd, 2021, I pled guilty to 2 federal felonies. I'll be listening to the judge now.
So there we are. Next week, February the 10th, she is going to be sentenced by a federal judge to those 2 felonies. And I think certainly as part of her rehabilitation, it's wonderful that she was willing to go and create this YouTube video. This video, I think everybody needs to watch because it really has an impact. So what should you be looking for if you believe that somebody within your own family or a neighbor or a friend may be at risk of becoming a victim or worse, a money mule as well? Look for changes in their behavior. Maybe they're going to be going out, going to the credit union, to the bank, withdrawing cash, going to the grocery store, buying gift cards, even asking you, how does Bitcoin ATMs work? Huge red flag. So watch out for that, because that is probably a huge indicator that something is wrong. They may actually get into financial difficulty. They may come and ask if they could borrow money in order just to simply pay their own utility bill because they've been giving all their other money to the scammer. So what should you do if you are a victim and have lost money to the scammer? The worst thing we can do is stay silent. And if you are living in the San Diego County area, then this is the number you can call. This is the number that goes out to Adult Protective Services, and they can be of a great help to you and a great resource, and they can also assist with helping to file a police or sheriff's crime report. Now, if you do file a crime report and law enforcement tells you this, oh, you know what, the suspect is probably overseas, it's not worth taking a report. Don't put up with that. We have got to convince every single law enforcement agency to do a report. And the reason being that we need the statistics to be able to present them to our local, state, and federal legislatures to show them how prevalent this crime is in order to receive more budget money so that we can hire more prosecutors, we can hire more investigators, more APS workers in order to try to go after these crooks. We've got to convince victims to overcome feelings of embarrassment. We all know that, how obvious it is to be embarrassed. But if you can overcome that, the worst thing is to stay silent. So if you have found yourself wiring money or buying gift cards, you should contact the institution or the store immediately. For example, if you've given the number on the back of the gift card to the crook already, maybe they just haven't got around to doing anything about it. Maybe you can actually salvage that. But certainly call your local law enforcement and demand that a report be taken. And as I said, be prepared for a refusal because of this response, okay? Sometimes they'll say this, well, there's no crime here because you gave the money voluntarily. That is an excuse. That is not accurate. That is not actually the legal interpretation. Just because you gave the money voluntarily doesn't make you any less a victim, okay? The crime has been committed. There is theft, there is fraud, there's misrepresentation. Or they might tell you the crime didn't occur here, we don't have the jurisdiction. That again is misleading, it's not correct, it's not accurate. It's unfortunately just an excuse not to take a report. Insist that a report be taken. The crime did occur in your jurisdiction because you received a phone call, you received an email, you received a text. That's where the crime occurred. So these responses are not appropriate, so firmly but politely insist on a report being taken. If they still refuse, write a letter. Who else can you contact besides your local law enforcement? Call the FBI, and every jurisdiction has their own branch office, and they will probably direct you to this website. It's called the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, and you can actually fill it out online. So ic3.gov is where you would go for that. Or you could just simply call the FBI in case they want to take a report over the phone, but this is the secondary option. Also, you can contact the Federal Trade Commission as well at fdc.gov.
This is you. You've been ripped off, and you've spotted a scam. Don't keep it to yourself. Take it to the Federal Trade Commission by filing a complaint. What kind of complaint? The Federal Trade Commission is the nation's consumer protection agency. So if a business doesn't deliver on its promises, or if someone cheats you out of your money, the Federal Trade Commission wants to hear about it.
So that's fdc.gov. There's also the U.S. Postal Inspector. If you receive a communication from the suspect through the mail, then you can also contact the U.S. Postal Inspectors, USPIS.gov, okay? So in summary, before I throw it back to Mark to see if we have any questions that we can answer, let's all be alert, okay? Be aware of our neighbors, our friends, our family, ourselves. Be skeptical. That's how I've tried to raise our children, who are now 41 and 35. You know, I've always tried to tell them, don't treat everything as being truthful. Test it, question it, cross-examine it. You have to do that. Be inquisitive. It is not rude to be inquisitive. And if somebody that you are feeling you're having this relationship with is not willing to go online and be part of a FaceTime, ask them why not, and then cut them loose. Please, please, please never, ever send money to somebody you've never met. That's the golden rule. Don't do it. Do not do it. Don't let your heart convince you otherwise. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to Mark to see if we have any questions. Mark.
Oh, Paul, great presentation today. Yes, we have a lot of questions here. Let me go ahead and turn on my webcam on again. I thought maybe you want to expand on this, and this is about Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is a big concern, especially because it's hard to trace, right? So any thoughts about people that maybe are being asked to use that as, maybe how to be very cautious about that type of technology, being requested to send money or that method?
Well, yeah, I mean, because it is so hard to trace, it is a huge red flag. Don't ever agree to send money that is being requested of you in the form of Bitcoin. Again, don't use gift cards. And I mean, the bottom line is anyway, don't ever send money in any form whatsoever to somebody you don't know. It just simply is not advisable at all, and it is a scam. So anyone who asks you to pay them in Bitcoin is very, very suspicious, and I would just never do it.
Yeah, very good point. Stay away. So Paul, here's a question here, and I'm sure a lot of us feel this way. Maybe we have some loved ones in our own family that we question maybe what's going on, and you know, if they're romantic online. How would you approach someone you think is being scammed, and what would you recommend? I know I'd have to be kind of delicate with that, you know, with obviously don't want, you know, they might have deaf ears if we come too hard, right?
Well, if you suspect that they are a victim, then there's a couple of things you can, and if they are over 60 or 65, feel free to contact Adult Protective Services in your county. And if you're not a mandated reporter, then you don't have to give your name. Just say, look, I'm worried about my family member. I'm worried about my neighbor. I think she or he is a victim of a romance scam. This is who they are. Now, APS will take the report and they will contact the victim, but they will not tell the victim how they know about this. They will keep your information confidential. That's what I would do, even if the victim themselves refuses to accept that they are a victim, because otherwise the losses are going to accumulate. It's because the scammer's not going to let them out of their hook. So you're actually doing the victim a favor by reporting it.
Very good. Now, to ask another question, are there still reasons people scam online dating if they're not asking for personal information or money? So I guess the question is, there could be other motives out there that other than money or information?
There could be, and they may be what I would call somewhat twisted or perverted. They may then want to actually get the person on camera and get them to do things on camera, and then take photos of the person doing something inappropriate that they'll then blackmail them later on by saying, well, I'm going to distribute these photos online if you don't give me $10,000 bucks. So then ultimately, I think money is at the center of most of this. But at first, they may never mention money, but just try to cultivate this intimacy that gets you to do things and say things which you are possibly going to be embarrassed about if they start circulating them online. And that's when they will try to blackmail you.
Thank you, Paul. Very good point. Jake wants to know, how successful were you getting any respective adult protective services or APS agencies involved, particularly if the victims could not be convinced that he or she was being victimized? Have APS agencies in general been helpful with those cases?
Well, we're spoiled in San Diego County, Mark, because we have a fantastic relationship between law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, and Adult Protective Services. We're on first name terms, we meet regularly, we share information, and that doesn't happen in every jurisdiction. So I get a lot of frustration from all over the country about the lack of response from Adult Protective Services agencies. But part of the problem is that APS is bound by confidentiality, and so they're very reluctant to share information once they've received it. But here's another point, particularly when APS goes out and talks to the victim and the victim refuses to accept that they're a victim, there's very little more that APS can do other than cross-report to law enforcement, and hopefully by having a uniformed officer. Sorry, there's probably a scammer phoning me right now. I'm just going to turn it off. So anyway, if law enforcement can convince the victim, but maybe not. But here's again, even if the victim doesn't accept they're a victim, it doesn't stop me as a prosecutor from trying to investigate further. Because even if the victim doesn't accept it, I know that this crook is doing it to this victim and doing it to somebody else. So it's very important for me to go after that suspect.
What are rights as a family member to stop mentally challenged, or what are some things that people could do to protect them? And I was thinking with this question too, addressing online, if there's a way to block them online or protect them from these predators. You know, what are some of the methods to maybe protect them?
This is a really difficult scenario, because on the one hand, we advocate for people with disabilities by saying, look, okay, so they have a disability, but it doesn't mean that they should be restricted in their movements, in what they do. They are a functioning member of society. So we try to give that person as many freedoms as they want to enjoy. But here's what I would do. If I was concerned about a family member with some kind of cognitive impairment, and they still have full control over their own finances, what I would do is write a letter to that person's financial institution and say, dear sir or madam, you may say it's none of my business, but I'm concerned about my brother. And I want you to pay special attention to his accounts, because I am afraid that he might become a victim of some kind of online scam. And if you see some suspicious transactions, then I want you to do the right thing. And as a mandated reporter, particularly if my brother is a dependent adult or an older adult, you are mandated in California to report it to an APS and or law enforcement. So I want you to do that if you see suspicious transactions online or it's coming through your branch. That's what I would do.
Here's a good question. I thought this was interesting too, because I put myself in your position and I was wondering how you'd answer this. Do you think a bona fide scammer would live in the same neighborhood? I guess that living in your neighborhood, I mean, I guess that could, yeah. But yeah.
That's an interesting point. Well, bona fide is actually a misleading term, because that means good faith. But scammers live in your neighborhood. Absolutely they do. And where do they masquerade? They may masquerade on nextdoor.com. They will be your very kind neighbor who says, oh, you're housebound during COVID. You don't want to go to Trader Joe's. I'll do it for you. I'll take your debit card or your credit card and I'll purchase these items for you. Yeah, there are people in our neighborhoods who are not good neighbors. Every neighborhood has that. You know, when something bad happens in a neighborhood, you always get the news people going to talk to the neighbor. Well, I live in, nothing like this has ever happened in this. I'm shocked. It's such a safe neighborhood. No neighborhood is safe these days. There's always somebody out there who is wanting to take advantage of us, whether we live in a gated community or somewhere else, it doesn't matter. We always 24/7 need to be on our guard.
I have a good question here. Begs the question, should elders just avoid all online dating services?
Well, I don't think you're ever going to get people to come off those. I think, though, that we need to be extremely cautious if we do go onto these websites, be extremely skeptical, never send money. I mean, there are certain rules that we can apply. It's just like saying, well, I won't ever use my credit card online. No, you know, we all of us do these days, but there are certain criteria, there's certain ground rules that we should put on ourselves and that we never compromise on, you know, and if you do go on a dating website, don't ever give money. And period, just say that to yourself, say that, write it down, put it on a sticky or whatever you want to do, but just make sure you don't violate your own rules.
And I'm just going to take one other question, and then I shared with Paul earlier a really good question that was emailed to me. I'm going to share that with everybody too. To end on that, never send money. I just had an attendee ask, how about sending airline tickets to an out-of-town person who wants that you met online? So you're going to send them tickets to fly them. Yeah.
Nope, do not do that. That is because they're going to somehow find a way of cashing in those airline tickets somehow to get a refund or use it for some other purpose. No, that again is sending them money. You may think you're sending them something tangible, but why should they be asking you to fund their airfare to, quote, come and see you? No. That is a huge red flag. Let them walk.
Have them walk, right? Yeah, they want to come out that bad. So I was sharing with Paul before we started about a good question that came up. These have been all great questions about someone being contacted through LinkedIn. And it seemed like a very, innocent question about COVID. And this conversation continued, but the person that was speaking with that member on LinkedIn asked to have a conversation through WhatsApp. And now this person claimed that they work off an oil rig in Scotland and that, wanted to contact through and keep his privacy. And I know I shared with you about WhatsApp and, reaching out to someone and the fraudsters that use this type of technology and they want you to use it. I do believe with some of those apps, they do protect the privacy of the person. So that's the angle they come in saying, hey, I want to protect my privacy, so go to this app. So I know you were sharing with me, Paul, that we're glad that people brought that to our attention because that could be a means where they're not traceable either, right?
Right, and sometimes we get a full sense of security by being on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn because typically we think, well, that's for professionals. We have our CVs on there, and so you're not going to get crooks on there. Oh no, crooks will go on LinkedIn and they will use stolen identities, and then they will reach out in a very subtle way as if it's part of a professional business. And so often you can test it out on LinkedIn, particularly to see who they are connected to. Are they connected to other people that you know? And if they are, then maybe it's okay to accept their invitation to join them. But if they start asking you more personal questions, which are not appropriate for your business, then be very, very skeptical. And if they ask you on WhatsApp, why? Why can't they do a Zoom call if they want to? So yeah, just be very, very careful.
Patrick was sharing with us that banks and credit unions are mandated reporters of financial elder abuse, and then said that, I had another comment here that not all states consider banks as mandatory reporters, but yes, California is.
Yeah, that's right. More and more states now are including banks and credit unions. And in fact, some states say everybody is a mandated reporter. So there's only a few states that don't make it mandatory. A lot of states make it permissible for banks and credit unions to make a report without fear of being sued. So I think you'll find that in most states there is an opportunity for banks and credit unions to make a report to adult protective services without violating privacy concerns.
We really appreciate your time, Paul, and a lot of this great information. I love how you provide your information for our members too, to reach out to you. It's nice to have someone in their corner. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark, and thanks everybody for tuning in.